A billionaire was on his way to close a multi-million-dollar deal when something outside his tinted SUV window made him forget the meeting, the money, and everything else. A black single mother was dragging an old mattress down a Detroit street with her young son beside her. Most people looked away. He almost did too. But then he saw the address she was walking toward, and what was waiting for her there made him stop cold. Because that broken house wasn't just any house. It was the one place he had spent 18 years trying to forget. This story begins with a mattress, a mother, and a secret that would change 3 lives forever. Monica Harris was dragging a mattress down the east side of Detroit at 4:32 in the afternoon. Not carrying it exactly. Carrying made it sound like there was balance, like there was a way to hold the thing with dignity. There was no dignity in the way the old queen-size mattress bent against her shoulder, the corners scraping the cracked sidewalk, the faded floral fabric wrapped in a gray-fitted sheet that kept slipping loose every time the wind cut between the buildings. She dragged it 3 feet, stopped, breathed, shifted her hands, then dragged it 3 more. Cars moved past her in both directions. Some slowed, not to help, only to stare. A delivery van honked when the mattress tilted too close to the curb. A teenager outside a liquor store lifted his phone for a second, laughed, then lowered it when Monica looked his way. 2 women standing by a laundromat window watched with the tired curiosity of people who had seen too much hardship to be surprised by another kind. Monica did not look at any of them for long. She had learned that looking back at people who stared only gave them permission to become cruel. Beside her walked her 7-year-old son, Jaden. He was small for his age, with thin wrists, serious eyes, and a blue hoodie that had been washed so many times the cuffs had started to fray. He carried a cracked picture frame against his chest with both hands. The glass inside the frame was broken across one corner, a silver line running through the smiling face of his father, Marcus Harris, who wore his firefighter uniform in the photograph and looked like a man who believed tomorrow would be kind. Jaden did not complain. That was the thing that hurt Monica most. Not the mattress, not the raw burn in her palms, not the ache in her back, or the empty feeling in her stomach. It was the silence of her child, walking beside her like this was just another thing children did in America when their mothers ran out of options. "Baby," Monica said, stopping beside a boarded-up beauty supply store. "You need a rest?" Jaden shook his head. "You sure?" "I'm okay, Mama." His voice was soft, careful, too careful. Monica looked at him, at the way he held that picture frame like it was the last piece of a house that no longer existed. She wanted to take it from him, but she couldn't. The frame was not heavy, not the way the mattress was heavy. It was heavy in a different way, the way memory becomes heavy when it is the only thing left that proves your life used to have more people in it. "Don't hold it too tight," she said gently. "That glass might cut you." Jaden loosened his grip a little, then tightened it again without realizing. "I won't drop Daddy," he whispered. Monica turned away before her face broke. The sky over Detroit was the color of old dishwater, low clouds pressing down over rows of brick houses, empty lots, corner stores with metal grates, and churches with signs promising Sunday healing to people who needed Monday rent. The air smelled like rain, bus exhaust, fried chicken from a takeout place on the corner, and the cold dust that rose when the wind moved through abandoned buildings. Monica had chosen the back streets because she thought fewer people would see them. She was wrong. People saw. They just did not stop. A city bus pulled up half a block ahead, sighing at the curb. The doors folded open. Passengers stepped down, eyes moving from the mattress to Monica to Jaden, then away. A man in a work jacket paused like maybe he was going to say something. His mouth opened. His eyes went to the mattress, then to his phone buzzing in his hand. The doors behind him hissed. He stepped away and kept walking. Monica lowered the mattress onto the sidewalk and pressed both hands against her knees. "Almost there?" Jaden asked. It was the first question he had asked in 15 minutes. Monica looked down the block, beyond the bus stop, beyond the chain-link fence around a vacant lot, beyond the cracked pavement where weeds grew through like stubborn little prayers. She could see the corner of East Palmer Street. "Almost," she said. It was not exactly a lie. It was not exactly true. It was one of those words mothers used when the truth was too heavy to hand to a child. A black SUV rolled slowly behind them. The vehicle did not belong on that block. It was too clean, too quiet, too polished. Its windows were tinted dark enough to turn the world outside into a reflection. The tires moved over the broken street without hurry, as if the car had never had to escape anything. Inside, the air was cool, the leather seats smooth, the dashboard glowing softly with numbers and maps and quiet wealth. Richard Whitmore sat in the back seat, reading a contract on a tablet. He was 46 years old, white, broad-shouldered, with silver beginning at his temples, and the stillness of a man who had spent his adult life being listened to before he even spoke. His company, Whitmore Urban Development, had offices on the 29th floor of a glass tower downtown. His name was on apartment buildings, donor walls, charity programs, and construction permits across the city. People called him a visionary in magazines. Investors called him disciplined. Tenants who had been priced out of neighborhoods he revitalized called him other things, but those voices rarely reached rooms where deals were signed. That afternoon, Richard was on his way to a private meeting in Grosse Pointe. 14 luxury townhomes, heated garages, rooftop terraces, lake views, the kind of development that made bankers lean forward and smile. His driver, Malcolm, kept both hands on the wheel. "Mr. Whitmore," Malcolm said, glancing at the mirror, "we can take Jefferson if you want to avoid the construction." Richard did not look up. "This is fine." His phone buzzed. A message from his attorney. Another from his assistant. A calendar reminder for a charity dinner that evening benefiting housing stability, which he had donated to every year but had never attended past the photo portion. He swiped the reminder away. Then something moved outside the window. At first he registered only the shape, a mattress tilted against a woman's back, a child beside her, a picture frame catching the gray light. Richard's eyes lifted from the tablet. The SUV continued forward, slow enough that he could see the woman's face when she stopped to adjust her grip. Sweat marked the edge of her hairline, though the afternoon was cool. Her jaw was set, not angry, not defeated, but locked in the way a person's face becomes when there is no more room for feeling, because all energy must go into motion. Richard watched her. He had seen poverty before. He had funded programs for it, spoken about it at luncheons, signed checks with compassion in the memo line. But through tinted glass, hardship usually moved like scenery. This did not. The child shifted the picture frame against his chest. The broken glass flashed. Richard looked away. He told himself it was not his business. People moved. People struggled. The city was full of stories a man could not stop for without losing the ability to function. He had a meeting. He had investors. He had a responsibility to the people who worked for him. He had built his life by keeping his focus on what could be controlled. The woman dragged the mattress another few feet. The child followed. Richard's tablet dimmed in his lap. "Slow down," he said. Malcolm eased off the gas. The SUV rolled forward at the pace of a walking man. Monica heard the car behind her but did not turn. Cars slowing behind you did not always mean help. Sometimes it meant laughter. Sometimes it meant danger. Sometimes it meant a man leaning out the window to say something he would never say to a woman who looked like she had someone coming for her. She kept moving. Jaden looked back once. "Mama," he said. What? That car is following us. Monica's spine tightened. She did not turn all the way around. She shifted the mattress higher and kept her voice calm. Just keep walking. The SUV slowed even more. Richard was no longer looking at Monica. He was looking past her, toward the end of the block. A street sign came into view. Green paint scratched near one corner. White letters worn but clear enough. East Palmer. For a moment, the city outside the glass lost its sound. Richard leaned forward slightly. The corner. The church with the red side door. The narrow alley beside the old market. The little brick house 3 lots down from the stop sign. No. His hand moved toward the door handle before his mind had finished the thought. Stop the car, he said. Malcolm looked in the rearview mirror. Here, sir. Stop the car. The SUV pulled to the curb. Monica heard the tires kiss the broken concrete. She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because her body was suddenly too aware of everything behind her. Jaden moved closer to her leg. The rear door opened. Richard stepped out into the cold afternoon air. The first thing he felt was the wind. Sharp, dirty, familiar in a way he did not expect. The second thing he felt was the sidewalk under his shoes. Not smooth lobby marble, not polished office stone. Uneven concrete, old cracks, places where winter had lifted the ground and left it that way. He stood beside the SUV and watched Monica pull the mattress toward the corner. She did not know him. She did not know he was watching. She did not know he could have bought every house on the block without checking his balance. She did not know that the street she was walking toward had once held every small thing he had spent half his life trying to forget. Monica reached the corner and paused. The mattress sagged against her side. Jaden stood beside her, picture frame pressed to his chest, looking at the houses ahead. Which one, Mama? He asked. Monica swallowed, then nodded toward a narrow 2-story house near the middle of the block. The house had a sunken porch, boarded windows, and a front door the color of weathered wood. The yard was waist-high with weeds. The gutter hung loose over one corner like a tired arm. It looked abandoned. It looked forgotten. It looked like a place the city had stopped expecting anything from. To Monica, it looked like the only promise she had left. That one, she said. Richard heard nothing from where he stood. But he saw where she pointed. His face changed. Not much. Not enough for anyone passing by to understand. But Malcolm, still sitting behind the wheel, saw it in the mirror. The color draining from his employer's skin. The way Richard's shoulders went rigid. The way his hand, still resting on the open car door, tightened until his knuckles paled. Richard knew that house. He knew the porch. He knew the shape of the upstairs window. He knew the front steps, even from half a block away. He knew the door that had once been blue. For 18 years, he had not spoken that address out loud. For 18 years, he had signed contracts for buildings all across Detroit and never once driven down this block. For 18 years, he had told himself there was no reason to come back. And now a black single mother with a mattress on her back and a child carrying a broken picture frame was walking straight toward the only house Richard Whitmore had ever truly called home. Monica dragged the mattress up to the curb in front of the house and let it fall gently into the weeds. She stood there breathing hard, one hand pressed to her side. Jaden looked up at the dark windows. Is somebody inside? He asked. Monica looked at the front door. No, she said. But Richard, standing half a block behind them, felt something inside him answer differently. Someone was inside. Not a person. A memory. A voice. A woman in white nursing shoes, coming home from the night shift and sitting on that porch, so her son would know she had stayed. Monica reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a key. Richard took one step forward, then stopped. The key turned in the lock. The old front door opened, and Richard Whitmore stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at the house he had abandoned, while a woman he had never met carried her mattress through the doorway as if she had been sent there by the one person he had never been able to face again. The door remained open for only a few seconds. Then Monica disappeared inside. Jaden followed, still carrying the cracked picture frame. The house swallowed them both. Richard stayed where he was. A gust of wind moved through the street, rattling loose branches against a chain-link fence. Somewhere farther down the block, a dog barked. A train horn echoed faintly across the city, but Richard barely heard any of it. His eyes remained fixed on the house. The house. Not a property, not an asset, not an investment. A house. His house. Or at least it had once been. Malcolm stepped out of the SUV. "You okay, sir?" Richard didn't answer immediately. He watched the front window, watched the shadows move inside, watched strangers occupy a place he had spent 18 years pretending no longer mattered. Finally, he spoke. "How long until my meeting?" Malcolm checked his watch. 22 minutes. Richard nodded. Then he surprised himself. "Cancel it." Malcolm blinked. The meeting involved investors. Millions of dollars. Weeks of preparation. Richard never canceled meetings. Yet here he was staring at an old house on a forgotten block like a man who had lost something valuable. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Malcolm hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Richard turned back toward the house. The front door remained slightly open. Just enough for him to see darkness inside. Just enough for memory to crawl through. He should have left. Instead, he stood there another minute, then another, and another. Until finally, Monica closed the door from inside. The sound echoed down the quiet street. Richard felt it somewhere deep in his chest, like a chapter ending, or beginning. 3 weeks earlier, Monica Harris sat at a small kitchen table in apartment 2B on Jefferson Avenue. The apartment wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, peeling paint, a refrigerator that hummed louder than it cooled, a bathroom fan that hadn't worked in years. But it was home. At least it had been. A white envelope sat on the table in front of her. She had already read the letter 4 times. The words hadn't changed. They still felt impossible. Property ownership transition notice. All tenants must vacate the premises within 30 days. No exceptions, no renewals, no extensions. The building had been sold. The new owners planned major renovations, luxury apartments, higher rents, new tenants, new lives. Monica folded the paper, then unfolded it again. Across the room, Jaden sat on the floor assembling a puzzle. He looked up. "You okay, Mama?" Monica smiled. The smile hurt. "I'm okay, baby." It was a lie. Jaden returned to his puzzle. Monica looked away before he could see the fear in her eyes, because she already knew the math. The math never lied. Rent had gone up twice in 2 years. Food prices had climbed. Medication costs had climbed. Everything climbed except her paycheck. Now even that was gone. 2 weeks earlier, Detroit public schools had cut cafeteria staff, budget reductions, administrative language for people losing jobs. Monica had worked there for nearly 6 years, serving lunches, wiping tables, learning children's names, sneaking extra fruit into backpacks when she knew a kid might not eat dinner. Then, one Friday afternoon, she had been called into the office, and by Monday, she no longer had a job. No dramatic speech, No scandal. No mistake. Just numbers. Numbers deciding lives. The same way they always did. She looked around the kitchen. The clock on the wall. The magnets on the refrigerator. The school picture of Jaden taped beside the freezer. Ordinary things. Small things. Things people never notice until they realize they're about to lose them. A knock came at the door. Monica already knew who it was. Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs. The elderly Puerto Rican woman entered carrying a casserole dish. The smell of chicken and rice filled the room. "You haven't eaten." Monica sighed. "I'm fine." Mrs. Alvarez gave her a look. A grandmother's look. The kind that saw through every lie. "No, you're not." Jaden immediately abandoned his puzzle. "Chicken!" Mrs. Alvarez laughed. "There he is." Monica watched as the older woman served food onto 2 plates, one for Jaden, one for Monica. Then she sat down across from her. Neither woman spoke for a moment. Finally, Mrs. Alvarez glanced toward the letter. "Any luck finding a place?" Monica shook her head. "No." "What about the apartments near Mack Avenue?" "Rejected." "The duplex on Gratiot?" "Rejected." Mrs. Alvarez sighed. Monica already knew the reasons. Single mother, low income, recently unemployed, child with a medical condition. No landlord ever said all of it directly. They didn't need to. Their faces did the talking. One property manager had looked at Jaden's medical paperwork and frowned. Another had glanced at Monica's employment history and suddenly remembered the unit was already taken. A third had simply stopped returning calls. Monica pushed food around her plate. "What am I supposed to do?" Mrs. Alvarez reached across the table, placed a hand over hers. "You keep going." Monica laughed bitterly. "That's not a plan." "No." The older woman squeezed her fingers. "It's survival." Monica lowered her eyes, because survival was something she knew too well. Marcus had taught her that. Marcus Harris, her husband, the man smiling from the photograph Jaden carried now. 3 years earlier, he had kissed her goodbye before an overnight shift with Detroit Fire Department. He never came home. A warehouse fire, a structural collapse, a city headline, a folded flag, a funeral. A 7-year-old boy who still looked at pictures because memories were beginning to fade. After Marcus died, everything became smaller. The paycheck, the apartment options, the future, the margin for error. Every year, something disappeared. First savings, then insurance, then the car, then stability, now home. Monica looked toward the living room, toward the photograph hanging on the wall. Sometimes she still talked to Marcus when nobody was listening, not because she expected answers, because silence felt worse. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she whispered. Mrs. Alvarez followed her gaze, then spoke softly. "Yes, you do." Monica looked back. "You always do." The older woman smiled sadly. That's the problem with strong people. The final week arrived faster than Monica expected. The apartment grew emptier every day. Furniture disappeared. Boxes accumulated. Closets emptied. Life shrank. Jaden noticed. Children always notice. One evening he sat beside her on the couch. "Mama? Yeah? Are we moving because we're poor?" The question hit harder than any eviction notice. Monica stared at him, at the innocence, at the fear hiding underneath it. She pulled him closer. "We're moving because life got hard." "That's the same thing." She almost cried. Instead, she kissed the top of his head. "No, baby." He looked up. "Then what's the difference?" Monica searched for words. The kind mothers invent because the truth is too sharp. Being poor is something that happens. Jaden listened. Being who we are is something nobody can take. He thought about that, then nodded slowly, as if storing the answer away for later. Outside, snow began falling. The first snow of the season, thin flakes drifting through orange streetlights. Beautiful from a distance, cold up close, just like most things lately. 2 days before they had to leave, Monica visited a housing assistance office downtown. The waiting room was crowded. Mothers, veterans, elderly people, people staring at forms, people staring at floors, people staring at nothing. After 3 hours, her number was called. The caseworker barely looked up. Monica explained everything: the job loss, the eviction, Jaden's condition, the approaching deadline. The woman typed into a computer, clicked a few boxes, read a screen, then shrugged. "We can refer you to a shelter." Monica blinked. "A shelter? Temporary housing. With my son?" The woman nodded. "It's what we have available." Monica sat there silently, trying to process how quickly a life could collapse. The caseworker turned back toward her screen. Conversation over. Problem processed. "Next number." Monica stood, thanked her anyway, then walked out, because being polite cost less than being angry. Outside, downtown Detroit glittered beneath winter sunlight. Glass towers, restaurants, luxury apartments, construction cranes. The city looked prosperous, successful, growing. Monica stood among it all, holding a folder full of rejection letters, invisible. She didn't know it yet. But one of those towers belonged to Richard Whitmore, and one of his companies had already changed the course of her life. Neither of them knew the other existed. Not yet. But somewhere in the city, 2 stories were already moving toward the same address, toward the same house, toward the same old front door. And neither one was ready for what waited there. The first night inside the house felt colder than Monica expected. Not because of the weather, because empty houses held a different kind of cold. The kind that came from silence. The kind that settled into walls when no one had laughed inside them for years. The kind that made every floorboard creak sound like a question. Monica spread the mattress across the living room floor. Dust floated through the beam of a streetlight shining through a cracked window. Jaden sat beside the mattress, carefully placing the picture frame of his father against the wall. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The house seemed to be listening. Finally, Jaden looked around. "Does it always smell like this?" Monica laughed softly. The first real laugh she had managed all day. "No." "What does it smell like?" She looked around the dark room. Old wood, dust, rain, time. Like nobody's lived here for a while. Jaden considered that, then nodded. "We can fix that." Monica felt something tighten in her chest. Children had a way of saying simple things that sounded like wisdom. She reached over and brushed a hand through his hair. "Yeah," she whispered. "We can." But later that night, after Jaden fell asleep, reality returned. Monica sat alone on the edge of the mattress. The house was quiet, except for distant traffic and the occasional groan of old pipes hidden somewhere inside the walls. Her phone sat beside her. The battery was nearly dead. Her bank account held less than $200. She had no job, no electricity yet, no furniture, no certainty. Only a house that looked one strong storm away from falling apart. and a little boy sleeping beside her. She lowered her head into her hands. For a moment she let herself feel everything. The fear, the exhaustion, the humiliation, the anger. Not at one person, at life. At how hard it had become just to stay standing. She thought about Marcus, about all the nights they used to sit together after Jaden was asleep, talking about nothing important, arguing over movies, planning vacations they never took, dreaming about a future that seemed so close then, a future that disappeared the moment she became a widow. Monica closed her eyes. "I could really use your help right now," she whispered into the darkness. The house offered no answer, only silence. The same silence she'd been carrying for 3 years. The next morning brought sunlight, weak sunlight, but sunlight all the same. Jaden woke up first. Monica found him standing near the front window. "What are you doing?" He pointed outside. "There are kids." Across the street, 2 boys were riding bicycles. They looked roughly Jaden's age. The boys noticed him. For a second, Monica thought they might wave. Instead, one of them pointed toward the house. The other laughed. Then both rode away. Jaden kept staring through the glass. His shoulders dropped slightly. Monica knew that feeling. The feeling of realizing you were different before anyone actually said it. "Give it time," she said. He nodded, but neither of them fully believed it. By afternoon, Monica headed downtown. She needed work, any work. She left Jaden with Mrs. Grace Holloway, the elderly woman living 2 houses away. Grace had introduced herself that morning carrying a plate of cornbread. The gesture felt almost miraculous. Most people saw abandoned houses and avoided them. Grace had seen new neighbors. "Boy needs watching?" she'd asked. Monica hesitated, then nodded. Trust came slowly these days, but kindness still mattered. Now Jaden sat on Grace's porch drinking lemonade while Monica boarded a bus toward downtown Detroit. The bus was crowded. Construction workers, nurses, students, people carrying lunchboxes and backpacks and grocery bags, people trying, people surviving. Monica filled out applications all afternoon. Restaurant, hotel, convenience store, laundry service, medical office. Everywhere seemed interested until they reached the section asking about recent employment, or scheduling flexibility, or transportation, or childcare. The answers always changed the conversation. By 4 o'clock, she had collected 6 polite rejections. The 7th wasn't polite. The manager of a small diner near Woodward Avenue barely glanced at her paperwork. "We need reliability." Monica blinked. "I am reliable." He shrugged. "We need someone without complications." Complications. The word landed harder than an insult. She knew exactly what it meant. A child, medical appointments, limited availability, a life that didn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet. Monica thanked him anyway, then walked out before her dignity broke apart. Outside, cold wind rushed between buildings. Downtown glittered around her. Luxury condos, coffee shops, new restaurants, expensive apartments rising toward the sky. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked successful. And somehow she felt more invisible than ever. A group of young professionals crossed the street laughing. Nobody noticed her. Nobody noticed the woman holding a folder full of rejection letters. Nobody noticed the mother wondering how long $200 could keep the lights on. Nobody noticed. That hurt almost more than cruelty. Cruelty at least acknowledged your existence. The bus ride home was worse. Halfway back, an elderly man boarded carrying several grocery bags. The vehicle was packed. Nobody moved. Nobody looked up. Everyone stared at phones, at windows, at nothing. Monica immediately stood. "You can take my seat." The old man smiled. Thank you. She spent the next 20 minutes standing as the bus bounced through potholes. Her legs ached. Her back hurt from the mattress the day before. But she didn't regret it. Not even a little. When the old man exited, he paused beside her. Your mama raised you right. Monica smiled. My grandmother did. The man laughed, then stepped off the bus. The comment stayed with her, because it reminded her of something. No matter how bad life became, kindness cost nothing. Sometimes it was the only thing left you could afford. That evening, Monica stopped at a small grocery store near East Palmer Street. She counted every dollar carefully. Bread, milk, peanut butter, soup, a few bananas, nothing extra. At checkout, she realized she was $3 short. Her stomach dropped. She began putting items back. First the bananas, then the soup. A woman behind her in line sighed dramatically. The sound carried through the store. Monica felt heat rise into her face. The cashier avoided eye contact. The woman checked her watch. Everyone suddenly seemed very interested in her failure. Then a quiet voice spoke. I've got it. Monica turned. An elderly black woman she had never seen before stepped forward. Silver hair, purple coat, kind eyes. She handed the cashier $5. It's okay, Monica said quickly. The woman smiled. Baby, one day you'll help somebody else. Monica stared at her, then slowly nodded. Because she knew the woman was right. Someone always helped someone. That was how people survived. Not systems, not corporations. People. The woman gathered her groceries and left before Monica could even ask her name. Back at the house, Jaden was sitting on the porch steps, waiting. The moment he saw her, he ran forward. Guess what? What? Mrs. Grace says this house used to belong to somebody important. Monica laughed. Important how? Jaden shrugged. She wouldn't tell me. Grace appeared from her yard, watching them, smiling. Then she called across the fence. That house has stories. Monica looked toward the old structure, the fading porch, the weathered boards, the dark second-floor window. I believe that. Grace nodded slowly, more slowly than before, as if deciding something. There was a boy who grew up there. Monica waited, but Grace stopped talking. What happened to him? Monica asked. The old woman looked toward the house, then toward the street, toward something only she remembered. He left. That's it? Grace smiled sadly. Sometimes that's enough. Before Monica could ask another question, Grace went inside, leaving her standing there, watching the house, wondering. A few blocks away, inside a downtown office tower, Richard Whitmore stood beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Detroit. The city stretched beneath him, thousands of lights, thousands of lives, thousands of stories. His assistant stood nearby reviewing tomorrow's schedule. Richard wasn't listening. Because for the second straight day, he found himself thinking about one thing. One woman, one little boy, one mattress, and one old house on East Palmer Street. A house he had spent 18 years trying to forget, yet somehow could no longer stop remembering. And for the first time in a very long time, Richard Whitmore found himself wondering whether the life he had built had cost more than he realized. The thought followed him home. It followed him into the underground garage beneath his luxury high-rise. It followed him into the private elevator that carried him 32 floors above the city. It followed him through the glass doors of a penthouse large enough to fit 3 families comfortably. And somehow, despite everything he owned, it was still there. Waiting. Richard dropped his keys onto the kitchen counter. The sound echoed through the apartment. Nobody answered. Nobody ever did. The silence inside the penthouse was different from the silence inside the house on East Palmer Street, but it was silence all the same. He loosened his tie, walked toward the window, and looked down at Detroit. Thousands of lights stretched across the darkness, cars moving, people working late shifts, families eating dinner, children doing homework, lives unfolding beyond the glass. Richard had spent years looking at the city from above. Tonight, he found himself thinking about what it looked like from the sidewalk, from the perspective of a woman dragging a mattress through traffic, from the perspective of a boy carrying a broken picture frame. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. Investors want to reschedule. Richard stared at the screen, then set the phone face down. For the first time in years, business felt far away. The house felt close. The following morning arrived gray and wet. Low clouds hung over Detroit. Rain tapped softly against rooftops. Monica woke before sunrise. The house was cold, colder than the night before. She carefully slipped from beneath the blanket without waking Jaden. The boy was curled against the mattress with the picture frame beside him. His father's smiling face reflected faintly in the early morning light. Monica stood there for a moment, watching, memorizing. Because life had taught her that ordinary moments never stayed ordinary for long. Then she quietly walked into the kitchen. The cabinets were empty. The refrigerator was empty. The sink dripped slowly. One drop, then another. She opened her wallet. $173. That was everything. Every decision mattered now. Every dollar. Every hour. Every meal. She closed her eyes, took a breath, then got ready for another day. By late morning, Monica and Jaden were walking toward a neighborhood resource center several blocks away. Rain misted through the air, not enough for umbrellas, just enough to make everything damp. The streets glistened. Old brick buildings reflected in puddles. A city bus roared past. Jaden walked beside her carrying a small backpack. Do you think we'll get electricity soon? I hope so. Do you think they'll fix the street light by our house? Maybe. Do you think... He stopped. Monica looked down. What is it? Jaden shrugged. Nothing. But she knew that look. Children often stopped asking questions when they became afraid of the answers. Monica squeezed his shoulder gently. We're gonna be okay. He nodded, the way children nod when they want to believe their parents, even when they aren't sure. The resource center was crowded. People filled plastic chairs along the walls, mothers with toddlers, veterans, retirees, teenagers looking for work, everyone waiting for something, a job, a voucher, a chance. Monica signed in, then sat beside Jaden. Nearly 40 minutes passed, an hour, then another. Eventually, a counselor called her name. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. There were forms, waiting lists, programs already full, resources stretched thin. The counselor was kind, but kindness wasn't housing. Kindness wasn't employment. Kindness wasn't medicine. When Monica left the office, she carried the same problems she had brought inside. Only now they felt heavier. The rain intensified as afternoon approached. Monica and Jaden started walking home. The wind picked up. Traffic splashed through puddles. Storefront signs rattled overhead. Halfway back, they passed a bus stop near an abandoned pharmacy. Several people stood beneath the shelter, trying to stay dry. Monica barely noticed them at first. Then she heard someone fall. The sound wasn't loud, just sudden. A body collapsing against concrete. People turned. A few stepped back. Nobody moved forward. An elderly man lay on the sidewalk beside the bench. Thin coat, Gray beard, weathered hands. One grocery bag had split open beside him. Cans rolled across the pavement. The old man looked disoriented, confused, embarrassed. Monica didn't hesitate. She immediately rushed toward him. "Sir?" Jaden followed. The people beneath the shelter watched, but nobody joined her. Monica knelt beside the man. "Can you hear me?" He nodded weakly. "Just got dizzy." His voice trembled. Monica helped him sit upright. The rain dampened her jacket. She ignored it. Jaden chased down the cans rolling toward the curb, returning them one by one. The old man tried to stand. His knees buckled. Monica steadied him. "Take your time." A woman waiting for the bus glanced at her watch. A businessman looked away. Life continued. Nobody wanted trouble. Nobody wanted involvement. Nobody wanted responsibility. Monica understood. But she couldn't leave. Not like this. Not him. The old man finally sat on the bench, breathing hard. "Thank you." Monica smiled. "You're welcome." Then she noticed something. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from hunger. The realization hit instantly, because she recognized it. She had felt it herself, many times. Monica reached into her backpack, pulled out a wrapped sandwich, turkey and cheese, the last food she had brought for herself. Dinner. Maybe breakfast, too. She stared at it briefly, then handed it over. The old man blinked. "No, ma'am, please. You need this." Monica smiled softly. "So do you." The old man looked at the sandwich, then at her, then at Jaden. Emotion flickered across his face. The kind people rarely show strangers. "I can't take your food." "You can." She pressed it into his hands. For a moment, nobody spoke. Rain tapped against the shelter roof. Traffic hissed across wet pavement. The city moved around them. The old man slowly accepted the sandwich. "Name's Earl." "Monica." He nodded toward Jaden. "And this young man?" "Jaden." Earl smiled. "You got a good mama." Jaden didn't answer immediately, then quietly said, "I know." Monica looked away before tears could find her. A black SUV sat across the street, parked beside the curb. Richard Whitmore had intended to drive past. Nothing more. He had told himself that morning he simply wanted to see the house again. One last time. Maybe understand why he couldn't stop thinking about it. Instead, he found himself watching Monica and Jaden walk through the city. He told himself it was coincidence, then curiosity, then concern. None of those explanations felt entirely honest. Now he sat in the back seat watching Monica give away the last sandwich she owned. Malcolm glanced into the mirror. "You know her?" Richard didn't answer. Across the street, Monica helped Earl gather the remainder of his groceries. The old man laughed at something Jaden said. For a brief moment, despite the rain, despite the hardship, despite everything, all three of them smiled. Richard felt something uncomfortable inside his chest. Not guilt, not exactly. Recognition. Because he remembered someone else who used to do things like that. His mother, Ellen Whitmore. She had never been able to pass a struggling person without stopping. Never been able to ignore need. Even when money was tight. Even when life was hard. Even when she had every reason to focus only on herself. Richard watched Monica hand Earl her final meal, and suddenly remembered being 9 years old, watching his mother give groceries to a neighbor who couldn't afford them, watching her walk home with less than she started with, watching her smile anyway. The memory arrived without warning. Sharp, clear, alive. For the first time in years, Richard didn't push it away. Monica and Jaden finally continued home. The rain softened. The clouds began to break. A thin strip of sunlight appeared near the horizon. Golden light spilled across wet streets, turning puddles into mirrors. Jaden walked quietly beside her. After a few blocks, he finally spoke. "Mama." "Yeah? Were you really not hungry?" Monica smiled. There it was. Children always knew, even when adults pretended. "I'm okay." Jaden stopped walking. She turned. He looked directly at her. "You always say that." Monica froze. For a second, she saw something beyond his age, beyond 7 years old. She saw a little boy learning to recognize sacrifice, learning what mothers hide, learning what poverty teaches. And suddenly, she hated that, because children should not have to learn those lessons so early. She knelt in front of him. "I'm okay because you're okay." Jaden thought about that, then stepped forward and hugged her, without another word. Monica closed her eyes, holding him tightly. The rain had stopped completely. The city glowed beneath fading afternoon light, and from half a block away, unseen by either of them, Richard Whitmore watched the embrace, watched the woman who had almost nothing, watched the child who knew it. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he found himself unable to look away. Because something about Monica Harris no longer felt like a stranger's story. It felt like the beginning of a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered, but one that was already changing him anyway. The next morning, Richard Whitmore woke before dawn. That alone was unusual. For years, his mornings had followed the same routine: coffee, emails, market reports, meetings, numbers, decisions, control. But that morning, none of those things held his attention. Instead, he found himself standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Detroit, while the city slowly emerged from darkness. The skyline glowed blue beneath the first hint of sunrise. Office towers, construction cranes, glass buildings carrying his company's name. Proof of success. Proof of everything he had spent 2 decades building. Yet all he could think about was one weathered house on East Palmer Street, one woman, one child, and a mattress on a living room floor. Richard stared at the city below, then quietly asked himself a question he had avoided for 18 years. What happened to the house after I left? The answer should have been easy. He owned companies that could access property records in seconds. Yet he had never looked, never wanted to. Because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant facing things money couldn't fix. A few minutes later, he was sitting in his private office downtown. His assistant, Claire, entered carrying a tablet. "Good morning." Richard nodded. "Morning." She handed him the day's schedule. 3 meetings, 2 conference calls, a luncheon, an investor presentation, a charity board review. He glanced at the list, then pushed it aside. Claire frowned. That almost never happened. "Everything okay?" Richard looked toward the window. "Pull the records for a property." She opened her tablet. "Address?" For a moment he hesitated, then spoke. 1147 East Palmer. Claire typed. A few seconds passed. Her expression shifted. "That's odd." "What?" "The property sat vacant for almost 18 years. Richard felt his stomach tighten. 18 years. Almost exactly as long as he'd stayed away. Claire continued reading. tax delinquency, multiple citations, structural concerns, eventually entered city auction. Richard looked up. Auction? She nodded. The property sold recently. His pulse quickened. To who? Claire read the name. Monica Harris. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Richard leaned back in his chair. The house had a new owner. Not a developer, not an investment firm, not a corporation. A woman dragging a mattress. For reasons he couldn't explain, relief moved through him. Brief, unexpected, real. What else? Claire continued scrolling. Purchased for $3,200 through a tax foreclosure auction. Richard stared at the city. $3,200. He had spent more than that on dinner with investors, and somehow the most important property in his life had been sold for less than a month's parking fees in his building. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. Anything else? Claire shook her head. Not much. Richard nodded. Thank you. When she left, he sat alone, thinking, remembering. The front porch, the blue door, his mother planting herbs beside the steps, the smell of fresh paint, the sound of her laughter floating through open windows. Memories he had buried beneath years of success. Memories that suddenly refused to stay buried. Across town, Monica Harris was learning that owning a house and living in one were very different things. The kitchen sink didn't work properly. 2 upstairs windows wouldn't close. The furnace rattled whenever it started. And every room seemed to reveal a new problem. Still, it was hers. That mattered. Jaden sat on the living room floor eating cereal from a paper bowl. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows. The house looked less frightening in daylight. Still broken, still worn, but less lonely. Mom? Yeah? Do you think we can paint my room? Monica smiled. One day. What color? He thought carefully, then grinned. Blue. She laughed. Why blue? Jaden pointed toward the front door. The house wants it. Monica raised an eyebrow. The house told you that? No. He shrugged. It just looks sad without it. The answer stayed with her. Because somehow he wasn't wrong. The faded front door looked unfinished, like it was waiting for something or someone. Later that afternoon, Monica walked several blocks to a neighborhood grocery store. Money was running low. Jobs were still scarce. But she refused to give up. She had survived worse. At least that's what she kept telling herself. On the way home, she passed a small playground. Most of the equipment was old. Paint chipped, swings rusted. But children still filled the space with laughter. Monica slowed, watching. For a moment, she imagined Jaden playing there, making friends, feeling normal again. Then she noticed something near the edge of the park. A little girl crying, no more than 5 years old. Standing alone beside the fence. People walked past. Nobody stopped. Monica immediately changed direction. She crouched beside the child. Hey, sweetheart. The little girl wiped her eyes. You okay? The child shook her head. Monica looked around. No parents nearby? Another shake. Fear flashed across the girl's face. Monica felt her heart tighten. What's your name? Emma. Okay, Emma. Monica smiled gently. We're going to find your family. For nearly 20 minutes, she stayed with the child. Eventually, a frantic mother came running across the park, tears streaming down her face. The woman hugged her daughter tightly. then looked up at Monica. Relief flooded her expression. "Thank you." Monica smiled. "Of course." The woman offered money. Monica refused. The woman insisted. Monica still refused, because helping people wasn't something you sold. It was simply something you did. As she walked away, Emma waved. Monica waved back, then continued toward East Palmer Street, unaware that someone had witnessed everything again. Across the street, parked beside a coffee shop, Richard Whitmore sat inside his SUV. He had come to see the neighborhood. That was the excuse he gave himself. The truth felt more complicated, and every time he watched Monica choose kindness when nobody was watching, the question inside him grew louder. Who does that anymore? Not for recognition, not for reward, not for social media, just because another human being needed help. The answer reminded him of someone who used to live in a small house with a blue front door, someone who never walked past suffering without stopping, someone he missed more than he allowed himself to admit. His mother. Richard looked toward Monica as she disappeared down the sidewalk. Then toward the house waiting at the end of the block. The house where every road seemed to lead. The house where a frightened single mother was trying to build a future. The house where a little boy wanted blue paint on his bedroom walls. The house that had once belonged to his family. And suddenly, Richard understood something. He wasn't thinking about the house anymore. He was thinking about the people inside it. And that realization scared him more than he expected. Because caring had a way of changing things. And Richard Whitmore was beginning to care, whether he wanted to or not. A few minutes later, Monica turned onto East Palmer Street carrying a small grocery bag. She froze. Someone was standing across from the house, watching it. A tall man in an expensive coat, broad shoulders, silver at his temples. She recognized him immediately. The man from the SUV, the man she'd seen twice already. This time he wasn't inside a vehicle. This time he was standing directly across from her home. And for the first time since arriving on East Palmer Street, Monica felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Richard looked up. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Neither spoke. The distance between them suddenly felt very small and very important, because both of them knew the moment had finally arrived. The question was no longer whether Richard Whitmore would approach the house. The question was why. And neither one of them was ready for the answer. For several seconds, neither Monica nor Richard moved. The late afternoon light stretched long shadows across East Palmer Street. Wind stirred the weeds growing through cracks in the sidewalk. Somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed shut. Monica tightened her grip on the grocery bag. Richard stood with his hands at his chateaux. He suddenly felt ridiculous. A billionaire standing across the street from a house he hadn't entered in 18 years. Watching strangers. Following memories. Acting like a man haunted. Monica spoke first. "Can I help you?" Her voice was calm, but cautious. The kind of caution that came from experience. Richard crossed the street slowly, not wanting to appear threatening, not wanting to appear anything at all. "I don't mean any trouble." Monica almost laughed. Nobody who started with that sentence ever brought good news. She glanced toward the house, toward the front door, toward where Jaden waited inside, then looked back at Richard. "What do you want?" The question landed harder than she intended. Richard deserved it. The problem was that he didn't know how to answer, because the truth sounded strange even in his own head. "I saw you carrying a mattress. I followed you. I recognized your house. It used to belong to my family. I've been unable to stop thinking about it ever since." Instead, he said, I grew up here. Monica blinked. What? Richard nodded toward the house. This house. The wind seemed to stop. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Monica looked at the porch, the windows, the faded siding, then back at him. You lived here? When I was a kid. Monica studied his face, trying to decide whether he was telling the truth. He didn't look like a liar. He looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying something heavy that nobody else could see. Why are you here now? Richard looked toward the house, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to answer honestly. I don't know. The answer surprised both of them. Monica folded her arms. That's not much of an explanation. No, it really isn't. Richard nodded. A faint smile appeared. For a brief moment, Monica saw something unexpected. Not arrogance, not entitlement, embarrassment. The realization unsettled her. Powerful men usually weren't embarrassed. They were confident, polished, certain. This man looked uncertain, like he had wandered into a part of his own life he no longer understood. Behind Monica, the front door creaked open. Jaden stepped onto the porch. The moment he saw Richard, he stopped. The picture frame remained tucked beneath one arm. He looked from Richard to his mother, then back again. Children noticed tension before adults admitted it existed. Everything became very still. Richard looked at the boy, and suddenly another memory surfaced. A flash, a porch, a summer evening, a baseball glove. His mother sitting on the steps watching him play. The memory arrived so quickly it almost stole his breath. Jaden tilted his head. Were you really a kid here? Richard smiled faintly. Yeah. Which room was yours? Monica immediately shot her son a look. Jaden ignored it. Richard pointed toward the second-floor window facing the street. That one. Jaden turned to look. His eyes widened. That's gonna be my room. Richard felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain. Something gentler. Something more dangerous. Connection. The kind he had spent years avoiding. Monica noticed the shift immediately. She stepped forward slightly. Protective, subtle, but unmistakable. The movement reminded Richard of his mother, of every hard-working parent who stood between their child and the world. I should go, he said. Monica looked surprised. That's it? Richard nodded. For now. The phrase slipped out before he could stop it. For now. As if there would be another conversation. As if he expected to return. Monica noticed it too. Her expression hardened slightly. People didn't get attached this quickly. People didn't simply appear and become part of your story. Life had taught her that. Loss had taught her that. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. The name hung in the air. Monica froze. The reaction was small, barely visible. But Richard saw it. She knew the name, or at least recognized it. Most people in Detroit did. His company name sat on buildings throughout the city. Whitmore Urban Development, Whitmore Properties, Whitmore Communities, Whitmore Investments. The city seemed full of Whitmore signs. Richard watched her face carefully. Something changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to make him wonder why. Then Monica simply nodded. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. Richard walked away, toward his SUV, toward the life that made sense, toward boardrooms and contracts and decisions measured in percentages. Yet every step felt strangely difficult. When he reached the vehicle, He looked back once. Monica stood beside the porch, Jaden beside her, the house behind them. 3 figures framed by fading sunlight. A picture, a memory, a future. He wasn't sure which. That evening, Richard drove himself. No driver, no assistant, no schedule, just him. The city looked different from behind the wheel. Slower, closer, real. He found himself driving through neighborhoods he hadn't visited in years. Past apartment buildings, corner stores, bus stops, rows of houses, places his company had purchased, renovated, and transformed. Places investors called success stories. Yet now he noticed details he had ignored before. An elderly woman carrying groceries, a father fixing a bicycle, children playing basketball beneath a streetlight. Lives. Not numbers. Lives. The realization bothered him, because somewhere along the way, he had stopped seeing them. Later that night, Richard entered a room inside his penthouse that almost nobody ever saw. His study. Dark wood shelves, family photographs, boxes, old documents, pieces of a life he rarely examined. He opened a drawer, reached inside, and removed a single photograph. The edges were worn, the colors faded. A younger Richard stood beside a woman wearing nursing scrubs. His mother, Ellen Whitmore. Both of them stood in front of a bright blue front door. The same house, the same porch, the same place now occupied by Monica and Jaden. Richard sat down heavily, looking at the photograph, remembering. Ellen Whitmore had worked nights, always nights, hospital shifts, double shifts, holiday shifts, whatever it took. Money was never abundant, but somehow she made childhood feel secure anyway. Richard remembered Saturday mornings, pancakes, old records playing in the kitchen, paint cans, home repairs, the smell of fresh coffee. He remembered her laughter. More than anything else, he remembered that. Then came the final year, the illness, the treatments, the exhaustion, the slow realization that strength did not make someone immortal. When she died, Richard had been 28, old enough to understand grief, too young to survive it gracefully. So he left, locked the house, buried himself in work, built an empire, and convinced himself success was healing. Now he wasn't so sure. Because if success healed everything, why did one old house still hurt? Why did one little boy carrying a broken picture frame remind him of himself? Why did one exhausted mother feel so familiar? Richard stared at the photograph, then whispered something he hadn't said aloud in years. "I miss you, Mom." The room remained silent, but for the first time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a question waiting to be answered. Across town, Monica sat at the kitchen table inside the house on East Palmer Street. A battery-powered lantern cast soft yellow light across the room. Jaden slept upstairs. The house creaked occasionally, settling, breathing, existing. Monica held a notebook. Inside were numbers, expenses, bills, job applications, plans, the arithmetic of survival. Yet her attention kept drifting elsewhere, toward the conversation outside, toward Richard Whitmore, toward his name. Finally, she opened her phone, typed 3 words into a search engine: Richard Whitmore, Detroit. Results appeared instantly. Articles, interviews, awards, photographs, business journals, development projects. Millions. Billions. Influence, power. Monica stared at the screen, then at the house around her. The contrast felt impossible. Why would someone like that care about this place? Why would someone like that care about her? He probably didn't. That explanation made more sense, yet something about his eyes bothered her, because she recognized that look. She had seen it before, in hospitals, funeral homes, waiting rooms, the look of someone carrying grief. And grief recognized grief, whether people wanted it to or not. Monica closed the phone, extinguished the lantern, and sat quietly in the darkness, listening to the old house, listening to her son's soft breathing upstairs, listening to the strange feeling that life was shifting beneath her feet. Neither she nor Richard understood it yet, but the house did. The house had been waiting 18 years, and now, for the first time, everyone connected to it was finally coming home. 3 days passed before Richard returned. 3 days of meetings, contracts, investors, phone calls. 3 days of trying to focus on the life he had built. 3 days of failing. Because every time he sat in a conference room discussing development plans, he saw Monica standing in front of the old house. Every time someone mentioned housing numbers, he remembered Jaden sleeping on a mattress in a dark living room. Every time someone praised another successful project, he found himself thinking about East Palmer Street. The house waited. The memories waited. And eventually, Richard stopped pretending he could ignore either. Late Saturday morning, he drove there himself. No driver, no assistant, no security. Just a man carrying 20 years of unfinished grief. The neighborhood looked different in daylight. Children rode bicycles. Music drifted from open windows. Someone grilled food in a backyard. Life existed here in ways it never existed inside boardrooms. As Richard stepped out of the SUV, he noticed something unexpected. Monica was on a ladder. She was trying to repair a section of loose siding near the porch. The ladder wobbled slightly. The hammer in her hand looked borrowed. Jaden sat nearby sorting rusty nails into piles. Neither noticed him immediately. Richard stood there for a moment, watching. Not because they were doing anything remarkable, because they were trying. That mattered. Monica finally glanced down. The second she recognized him, her expression changed. Not fear, not anger, wariness, the kind earned through experience. She carefully climbed down. "What are you doing here?" No greeting, no smile, just the question. Richard respected that. He probably deserved less. "I wanted to talk." Monica folded her arms. "About what?" Richard looked toward the house, then back at her. "This place." Monica laughed once, short, dry, funny. "What?" "Most people spend their lives avoiding houses like this." Richard nodded. "Maybe. But not you, no." The answer surprised both of them. Monica studied him carefully, trying to understand why a billionaire kept showing up in a neighborhood most wealthy people never entered, trying to understand why he looked more comfortable standing beside a broken porch than inside the luxury vehicles parked nearby. Neither explanation made sense. Jaden stood. His eyes moved between them. "Are you staying this time?" Monica immediately shot him a look. "Jaden, what?" The boy shrugged. "He keeps leaving." Richard almost smiled. Children had a way of saying exactly what adults tried not to. "Maybe a little longer today." Jaden nodded as if approving the decision, then returned to sorting nails. Monica rubbed her forehead. "Sorry." "Don't be." For a moment, neither spoke. Wind moved through the tall grass growing beside the house. A loose shutter rattled softly. Finally, Richard gestured toward the damaged siding. "You know that's not going to hold." Monica looked at the wall. I know. Then why are you doing it that way? Her eyes narrowed, and suddenly Richard realized how his comment sounded. Like criticism, like judgment, like every wealthy man who had ever assumed he knew better. Monica's expression hardened instantly. Because it's what I can afford. The answer landed like a slap. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. Because there was nothing to argue with. She wasn't wrong. Monica saw the realization hit him. Good. Maybe he needed to feel uncomfortable. Maybe people like him needed to understand that not everyone could solve problems by writing checks. I wasn't trying to, I know. But her voice suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Silence settled between them. Heavy. Awkward. Then Jaden accidentally dropped a handful of nails. The sharp metallic sound scattered across the porch. Immediately, both Monica and Richard bent down to help. Their hands reached the same nail at the same time. For one brief second, they froze. Then Monica pulled her hand back first. The moment felt strangely personal. Neither understood why. That afternoon, Mrs. Grace Holloway appeared carrying lemonade, as always. The elderly woman seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to appear whenever tension filled the street. She handed cups to everyone, including Richard, then sat on the porch without invitation, like she owned the neighborhood, which in some ways she did. Grace looked directly at Richard. I remember you. Richard blinked. The statement caught him off guard. You do? Of course I do. Grace smiled. You were always running through Mrs. Whitmore's garden. A memory surfaced instantly. Mint plants. Rosemary. His mother yelling from the porch. Richard laughed unexpectedly. The sound surprised even him. Grace pointed a finger. There it is. What? Your mother's laugh. The smile vanished. Not because Grace had said something cruel, because she had said something true. Monica watched quietly. Something about the exchange felt important, like she was witnessing two pieces of a puzzle reconnect. Grace turned toward her. His mama was a good woman. Richard looked away. The statement hurt, because it reminded him how much time had passed, how much distance he had created, how many years he had spent avoiding the house, avoiding the neighborhood, avoiding himself. Grace continued. She loved that boy more than anything. Richard swallowed hard. The old woman wasn't finished, and she'd be disappointed in him. The porch became silent. Monica nearly dropped her cup. Jaden froze. Richard stared. Grace didn't flinch. The statement hung in the air. Honest, sharp, unavoidable. Finally, Richard spoke. Why? Grace looked directly into his eyes. Because she spent her whole life helping people. A pause. And you spent 18 years running. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Because everyone knew she was right. Richard looked down at the porch boards. The wood his mother once repaired herself. The porch she once sat on every evening. The porch he abandoned. For the first time, shame arrived without excuses, without defenses, without explanations. Just truth. And truth was uncomfortable. As evening approached, Richard remained, helping without being asked, holding boards, carrying tools, sweeping debris. Nothing dramatic, nothing impressive, just work. Monica watched from a distance, suspicious, because wealthy people usually performed kindness. They liked being seen doing it. Richard seemed different. He worked quietly, without announcements, without speeches, without photographs. almost like he was trying to earn the right to be there. That confused her more than anything. Near sunset, Richard stepped onto the porch carrying a small toolbox. He set it down beside Monica. "What's that?" "Basic repairs." She frowned. "I didn't ask for that." "I know." Monica stared at the box, then at him. The old instincts returned immediately. Nothing was free. Nothing came without strings, not in her experience, not ever. "What do you want from me?" Richard looked genuinely surprised. "Nothing. People like you always want something." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Immediately regret followed. Not because they were untrue, because they revealed more pain than she intended. Richard didn't get angry, didn't defend himself, didn't argue. Instead, he quietly asked, "What do you think people like me are?" The question stopped her, because suddenly she wasn't sure. Developers, investors, executives, people behind decisions, people behind evictions, people behind rising rents, people behind neighborhoods changing so fast that families couldn't stay. The answer felt obvious, yet standing in front of her wasn't a corporation. It wasn't a company. It was a man. And that made everything more complicated. Monica looked away. "I don't know." Richard nodded slowly. Neither did he. Not anymore. The sun sank lower. Golden light covered East Palmer Street. Long shadows stretched across the yard. And for the first time since arriving at the house, Richard felt something unfamiliar. Not guilt, not grief. Purpose. Small, fragile, but real. He looked toward the front door, toward the faded wood, toward the home his mother once loved, then back toward Monica and Jaden, toward the people living inside it now. People who had no idea how deeply connected their lives were becoming. Richard took a breath, because he knew what he wanted to do next. The problem was that he had no idea whether Monica Harris would ever let him. And hidden inside that uncertainty was a truth neither of them had discovered yet. A truth waiting just beneath the surface. One capable of changing everything. It revealed itself 3 days later. Not through a dramatic confession. Not through an argument. Not through fate. Through a logo. The discovery happened on a cold Tuesday afternoon. Rain tapped against the windows of the old house while Monica sat at the kitchen table filling out another job application. The lantern beside her cast a warm circle of light across the paperwork. Jaden was upstairs. The sound of him moving around drifted through the ceiling. The house no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied, alive, trying. A knock sounded at the door. Monica looked up. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, she found a man in work boots holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Harris, yes." The man smiled. "I'm looking for Richard Whitmore." Monica frowned. "Why?" "He asked us to come assess the property." "What property?" The contractor looked confused. "This house." Silence. The rain outside suddenly seemed louder. Monica stared at him. "What are you talking about?" The man checked his paperwork. Structural restoration estimate. His finger pointed to the company logo. Whitmore Urban Development. The name hit her immediately. Not because of Richard, because of somewhere else. Somewhere painful. Somewhere recent. Her stomach tightened. The contractor continued speaking. Something about inspections, permits, repairs. She barely heard any of it, because she was staring at the logo and remembering. A letter. An eviction notice. A property acquisition announcement. The exact same logo printed at the top. The exact same company. The exact same name. Whitmore. Suddenly, everything inside her went cold. The contractor noticed her expression. "Ma'am?" Monica slowly looked up. "When did he send you?" "This morning." "Without asking me?" The contractor hesitated. "I believe so." Something snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly. Like a rope pulled too tight for too long. Monica took a slow breath. Then another. The contractor wisely stepped backward. "Maybe I should come back later. Maybe you should." He left immediately. The truck disappeared down the street. But the damage was done. Because now Monica knew. And once you know something, you can't unknow it. An hour later, she sat alone at the kitchen table. The laptop borrowed from the library glowed in front of her. Search results filled the screen. Whitmore Urban Development. Whitmore Properties. Whitmore Housing. News articles. Awards. Interviews. Photographs. Project announcements. And there it was. The article. The one that made her hands start shaking. Jefferson Avenue Redevelopment Initiative. Acquisition of multiple residential buildings. Luxury renovation project. Existing tenants required to vacate. Projected completion date next year. The photograph beneath the headline showed Richard Whitmore smiling beside city officials. Monica stared at the image. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. She clicked another article. Then another. Then another. Every road led to the same place. Richard Whitmore. The man showing up at her house. The man carrying toolboxes. The man talking about memories. The man acting concerned. The same man whose company had purchased the building she lost. The same company that had forced her out. The same company that left her dragging a mattress across Detroit. The same company that left Jaden sleeping in a dark house without electricity. The realization felt like betrayal. Not because she trusted him. Because she had almost started to. And that frightened her more. By sunset, anger had replaced shock. Not explosive anger. Something worse. Quiet anger. Focused anger. The kind built from exhaustion. Years of it. Jaden noticed immediately. "Mama?" She looked up. "Yeah? You okay?" The question almost made her laugh. Everyone asked that question. Nobody wanted the real answer. "I'm fine." He frowned. "No, you're not." Monica looked away. Children always knew. The silence lasted several seconds. Then Jaden asked, "Did Mr. Richard do something bad?" The simplicity of the question hurt, because the answer wasn't simple. Life never was. Finally, she said, "I don't know," but deep down she thought she did. The following afternoon, Richard returned. He parked near the curb, stepped out, and immediately sensed something was wrong. The house looked the same. The porch, the windows, the peeling trim. Yet the atmosphere felt different, like a storm waiting. Monica stood near the front door, waiting, arms folded, expression unreadable. Richard knew that look. He had seen it in negotiations, courtrooms, board meetings, people preparing for a confrontation. The moment he reached the porch, she spoke. "You own Whitmore Urban Development." Not a question, a statement. Richard froze. For one brief second, he understood exactly what had happened, and exactly why she looked at him that way. "Monica." "No." Her voice stopped him. Sharp, controlled. dangerously calm. You knew. Richard swallowed. Knew what? Who I was. The accusation landed hard, because he hadn't. Not at first. But now that answer felt meaningless. Monica stepped closer. Rain clouds gathered overhead. The wind picked up. You knew where I came from. No. You knew exactly what happened to me. Monica, listen. My son lost his home because of your company. The words echoed across the porch. Jaden stood frozen inside the doorway, watching, listening. The house itself seemed to fall silent. Richard stared at her, unable to deny it, unable to escape it. Because somewhere inside the thousands of decisions made by executives and managers and lawyers and planners, she was right. His company bought the building. His company approved the project. His company changed her life. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not personally, but it happened, and he benefited. Monica saw the realization cross his face. Good. Let him feel it. For once, Joe, do you know what it felt like? She asked. Richard remained silent. She laughed bitterly. Of course you don't. The wind lifted strands of her hair. Tears threatened. She refused to let them fall. Do you know what it's like carrying everything you own down a street because somebody you've never met decided your neighborhood would make more money without you? Richard looked away, because suddenly he could see it. The mattress, the bus stops, the rejection letters, the shelters, the fear, the humiliation, not as statistics, as her life, as Jaden's life. And somehow that made it worse. Monica pointed toward the street. You didn't find me carrying that mattress. Her voice cracked. The first crack in the wall. You built the road that put me there. Silence. Complete silence. Even the neighborhood seemed to pause. Richard felt every word, because they were true. Not entirely, not directly, but true enough. The worst part was that he had no defense, no clever explanation, no corporate language, no presentation, no numbers. Only consequences. Standing right in front of him, wearing a worn jacket, protecting her son, looking at him like he represented every closed door she had faced, and maybe he did. Several seconds passed. Neither moved. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. Monica laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it wasn't enough. Sorry? Richard nodded. I know it isn't enough. No. It isn't. Another silence. Heavy. Painful. Honest. For the first time in years, Richard Whitmore felt completely powerless. Not financially. Emotionally. Because money couldn't erase this. Money couldn't undo it. Money couldn't return the months she lost, the nights she cried, the fear Jaden carried, the mattress, the eviction, the shame. None of it. Monica looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside, not inviting him in, not forgiving him, just ending the conversation. I'm tired, Mr. Whitmore. Richard nodded slowly. He understood. As he turned to leave, Jaden spoke from behind the screen door. A small voice, soft, honest, the kind only children possess. Did you mean to hurt us? Richard stopped walking. The question struck harder than anything Monica had said. Because children don't ask about policies, or economics, or development. They ask about intentions. Richard looked at the boy, then answered truthfully, "No." Jaden studied him, as if deciding whether to believe him, then quietly disappeared back into the house. The door closed. Richard stood alone on the porch, the wind blowing around him, the old house behind him, the weight of everything in front of him. For the first time in his career, he wasn't facing a business problem. He was facing a moral one, and deep inside, he knew something had changed. Because Monica Harris had just done something nobody had accomplished in 20 years. She had forced him to look directly at the human cost of his success, and once seen, it could never be unseen. As thunder rolled in the distance and the first drops of rain began to fall, Richard walked slowly back toward his car, not knowing that the longest night of his life was about to begin, a night that would force him to confront not only Monica's pain, but his own. Rain followed Richard all the way home. The windshield wipers moved steadily across the glass, back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm reminded him of something. Hospital monitors, waiting rooms, long nights, memories he usually kept buried. Detroit blurred beyond the windshield. Streetlights stretched into golden streaks across wet pavement. The city looked softer in the rain. Less certain. More honest. By the time Richard reached his penthouse, darkness had settled across the skyline. He entered the apartment without turning on the lights. The city glowed beyond the windows. That was enough. For years he had loved this view. Tonight it felt cold. The apartment felt enormous. Too enormous. Every room seemed designed to impress strangers. None seemed designed to comfort the person living inside them. Richard loosened his tie, dropped it onto a chair, then stood staring at the city. Monica's words repeated inside his head. "You didn't find me carrying that mattress. You built the road that put me there." He closed his eyes, trying to escape the sentence. He couldn't, because part of him knew she was right. Not entirely, but enough. Enough to hurt. Enough to matter. For 20 years he had measured success in square footage, profit margins, growth charts, property values. Tonight he found himself measuring something else. Who got left behind? The answer was harder to calculate, and impossible to ignore. Across Detroit, East Palmer Street sat beneath steady rain. Water dripped from gutters. Puddles formed along cracked sidewalks. The old house groaned softly as wind moved around it. Inside, Monica sat cross-legged on the mattress. A battery lantern glowed beside her. The living room remained mostly empty. No couch, no television, no dining table. Only the mattress, a few bags, a couple folding chairs, and determination. The room should have felt depressing. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful, because no one could make them leave. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month. The house was imperfect, but it was theirs. Jaden sat beside her coloring on the back of old job application forms. Children had a way of adapting, a way adults often forgot. He looked up. "Mama? Yeah? Do you think Mr. Richard is a bad guy?" The question arrived without warning. Monica froze. She looked at her son, then at the lantern, then back again. How do you answer that? She honestly didn't know. 3 years ago, the answer would have been simple. People who took homes from families were bad. People who made life harder were bad. People who profited while others struggled were bad. Life had become more complicated since then. Richard didn't fit neatly into any category. That frustrated her, because anger was easier when someone looked exactly like the villain. Richard didn't. He looked sad, lost, human. That made everything messier. "I don't know," she finally said. Jaden nodded, as if he had expected that answer. Then he returned to coloring. Several minutes passed. The rain continued outside. Then he spoke again. "I don't think he meant to." Monica looked up. "What makes you say that?" Jaden shrugged. "He looks lonely." The simplicity of the observation stole her breath. Children noticed things adults overlooked. And suddenly Monica remembered something. The way Richard stood staring at the house. The way he listened when Grace talked about his mother. The look on his face whenever he thought nobody was watching. Lonely. Maybe Jaden was right. Maybe that was exactly what Richard looked like. Monica hated the thought, because it made staying angry harder. And right now, anger felt safer than understanding. Across town, Richard poured himself coffee he didn't want, then sat inside his study. The old photograph remained on his desk, his mother smiling beside the blue front door. Ellen Whitmore. Nurse. Single mother. The strongest person he'd ever known. The person he had spent 18 years avoiding. Because grief worked that way sometimes. People assumed grief meant remembering. Sometimes it meant running. Richard picked up the photograph, and suddenly another memory surfaced. Clear, unexpected, painful. He was 10 years old. A winter storm had knocked out power throughout the neighborhood. The house was freezing. Snow covered the windows. The refrigerator barely worked. Money was tight. The furnace had failed. Richard remembered sitting beneath blankets while his mother cooked soup on a camping stove. The lights gone. The future uncertain. Yet somehow she had smiled. Not because things were okay, because she wanted him to believe they would be. The memory hit him hard, because suddenly he realized something. Monica had done the exact same thing. The mattress, the lantern, the reassurances, the impossible optimism. Not because she wasn't afraid, because Jaden needed her to be brave. The realization left Richard staring at the photograph for a long time. Then another thought arrived, one he couldn't shake. If his mother were alive, what would she think of the man he became? The question settled into the room like a weight, and for the first time in many years, Richard wasn't sure he liked the answer. Near midnight, the rain intensified. Thunder rolled above the city. Monica checked on the upstairs rooms before bed. The hallway remained dim. The house still needed work, a lot of work. She moved carefully through the darkness, checking windows, checking leaks, checking locks. The responsibilities felt endless. Then she noticed something. A faint draft near the staircase, cold air slipping through old wood. She knelt, examining the steps. One of them seemed loose, not dangerously, just enough to notice. The third step from the bottom. She pressed her hand against it. The board shifted slightly. Strange. She made a mental note to inspect it later, then continued upstairs, unaware of how important that step would soon become. Back downstairs, Jaden slept curled beneath blankets. The picture frame of his father sat beside him. Marcus Harris smiled forever from behind cracked glass, frozen in time. Monica sat beside the mattress for a while, watching her son sleep. Parents carried invisible burdens: fear, responsibility, love, hope. None weighed more than watching your child dream while you worried about tomorrow. She gently touched his hair, then looked around the room, at the lantern, the peeling paint, the old floor, the silence. And despite everything, she felt grateful. Not happy, not secure, not comfortable, grateful, because they were still together. Sometimes that had to be enough. At nearly the same moment, Richard sat alone inside his dark penthouse. The city lights reflected in the windows. The silence around him felt enormous. He thought about East Palmer Street, the mattress, the lantern, the boy, the mother, the house. Everything seemed connected now, like pieces of a story he hadn't fully understood. Then he remembered something Grace had said. She spent her whole life helping people, and you'd disappoint her. The words hurt because they carried truth. Richard stood, walked toward the window, and stared down at Detroit. Thousands of homes, thousands of families, thousands of stories. For years he had seen buildings. Tonight he saw people. And once that shift happened, there was no going back. Far below, headlights moved through rain-soaked streets. Life continued. Unaware that somewhere in the city, two families connected by one old house were moving toward a discovery neither could imagine. A discovery hidden beneath worn wood, waiting quietly beneath the third step from the bottom. Waiting for the right hands. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting to uncover a message left years ago by a mother who somehow understood that one day her son would need help finding his way home. Neither Monica nor Richard knew it yet, but by this time tomorrow, the past would finally speak, and everything would change. Morning arrived wrapped in pale winter sunlight. The storm had passed. Rainwater still clung to gutters and tree branches, sparkling beneath the gray sky. Inside the house on East Palmer Street, Jaden was already awake. Monica found him kneeling beside the staircase. "What are you doing?" He pointed. "My marble fell." She smiled. "The blue one? The lucky one." Monica laughed softly. "The lucky one always gets lost." Jaden leaned farther beneath the third step. His small arm disappeared into the darkness. Then he froze. "Mom." Something in his voice made her stop. "What?" His eyes widened. "There's something under there." Monica walked over. The loose step shifted slightly when she pressed it. She remembered noticing it the night before. Carefully, she crouched beside Jaden. Together they lifted the worn board. Dust drifted upward. Old wood groaned softly. For a moment, neither moved. Then Jaden reached inside. "What is it?" His fingers brushed against metal. Slowly, carefully, he pulled something free. A small blue tin box. Scratched, weathered, old, very old. The house suddenly felt quiet. Not normal quiet. Expectant quiet. Like the walls themselves were paying attention. Jaden turned the box over. "It's locked." Monica stared. Something about it felt important. Not valuable. Personal. The difference mattered. She brushed dust from the lid. Then saw it. A faded name written in black marker. Richard. The room seemed to tilt. For several seconds, she simply stared. The old house. The loose stair. Richard's childhood home. And now this. A box hidden beneath the floor for nearly 2 decades. Waiting. For him, Mom? Monica slowly stood. "We need to call him." Richard arrived 42 minutes later, faster than Monica expected, faster than he intended. The moment she mentioned the box, he had left a meeting without explanation. Now he stood inside the house. Inside his house. For the first time in 18 years. The moment he crossed the threshold, emotion hit him so hard, he almost stopped breathing. The smell. Old wood. Dust. Paint. Time. Every memory seemed alive, waiting, watching, welcoming. Monica noticed the look on his face. She said nothing. Some moments didn't belong to words. Jaden handed him the box. "You were right." Richard blinked. "What?" "The house was waiting for you." The boy's simple statement landed somewhere deep. Richard swallowed hard, then looked down at the box. His hands trembled slightly. Monica noticed. So did he. The realization embarrassed him. He was a billionaire. He negotiated billion-dollar deals. He spoke before investors, governors, executives. Yet a small metal box made his hands shake, because money had never frightened him. Memory did. Slowly he sat on the bottom step, the exact place where his mother once tied his shoes, the exact place where she waited when he came home from school, the exact place where she hid something for him all those years ago. His thumb brushed across the lid, dust smeared beneath his fingers. Then he carefully opened it. Inside lay a single folded letter. Nothing else. No jewelry. No deeds. No money. Just paper. Yellowed with age. Richard stared at it. For several seconds, he couldn't move. Monica quietly sat nearby. Jaden sat beside her. Neither interrupted. The house remained silent, waiting. Finally, Richard unfolded the letter. The handwriting hit him first. Small, neat, precise. His mother's handwriting. He hadn't seen it in nearly 20 years. And suddenly, he was 28 again, standing beside a hospital bed, saying goodbye. He blinked rapidly, then began reading. "Spencer." He stopped. A sad smile crossed his face. His mother always used his middle name when she was serious. He continued. "If you're reading this, it means you finally came home." The room disappeared. The words seemed to exist alone, suspended in time. Richard kept reading. "I know you, sweetheart. You think leaving will make things hurt less. You think success will protect you from grief. You think distance is healing. It isn't." The letter shook slightly in his hands. Monica watched silently. Richard read on. "This house was never about wood and nails. It was never about the porch or the roof. It was never even about me. It was about you knowing there would always be somewhere to come back to. A place where you belonged before you earned anything. Before you proved anything. Before the world told you what success was supposed to look like." Richard closed his eyes briefly. The tears came anyway. Not dramatic, not uncontrollable, just honest. The kind grief saves for years. He continued. "Do not spend your life building homes for people who already have one while forgetting the people still looking. Remember what it felt like to be scared. Remember what it felt like to need help. Remember who you are." Then came the final lines. The lines that stole the air from the room. The lines that changed everything. "The first night we moved into this house, we slept on a mattress in the living room. I carried it home myself because it was all I could afford. You fell asleep before I finished making the bed. I lay beside you and listened to the house settle around us, and I knew we'd be okay. If one day you have enough money to build homes for the wealthy, promise me you'll never forget the people carrying mattresses." Richard stopped reading. Silence filled the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The old house seemed to breathe around them. Monica felt chills. Because suddenly everything connected. The mattress. The house. The mother. The son. The past. The present. All of it. Richard stared at the page, unable to look away, unable to escape. unable to pretend anymore. The letter had found him, and with it came a truth he had avoided for nearly 20 years. His mother had understood him better than he understood himself. Even then. Especially then. Jaden quietly broke the silence. "Your mom sounds nice." Richard laughed through tears. A small laugh. A real one. "Yeah." He looked around the room. At the staircase. At the old walls. At Monica. At Jaden. Then back at the letter. She was. Several minutes passed before anyone spoke again. Finally, Monica asked softly, "Did she know you'd come back?" Richard stared at the paper, then nodded. "I think she hoped." Monica looked around the house. The patched walls, the worn floor, the mattress still sitting in the living room. The house wasn't beautiful. Not yet. But suddenly it felt important, like something larger than all of them. A bridge between lives, between generations, between pain and healing. Richard carefully folded the letter along its original creases, exactly the way his mother had folded it, then placed it back inside the tin box. He held it in both hands, protectively, almost reverently. For a long time, nobody spoke. The afternoon light shifted slowly through the windows. Dust floated through golden beams. The house seemed warmer somehow, not because the temperature changed, because something inside it had. Richard finally looked up. His eyes moved toward Monica, then toward Jaden, then toward the mattress. The same mattress that had first stopped him on the street. The same mattress his mother had written about. The same symbol connecting two families across 20 years. And in that moment, Richard Whitmore understood exactly what he needed to do. The problem was that doing it would require far more than money. It would require change. Real change. The kind his mother had been asking for all along. Outside, the sun slipped lower across Detroit. Inside the house, 3 people sat together in silence. One carrying grief. One carrying survival. One carrying hope. And for the first time since his mother's death, Richard no longer felt lost. The path forward was finally visible. Now he only had to be brave enough to walk it. The next morning, Richard Whitmore canceled every meeting on his calendar. His assistant thought he was sick. His board assumed a major acquisition had fallen apart. 2 investors called asking if there was a problem. Richard ignored them all. For 20 years, every crisis in his life had been solved with a conference room, a contract, or a check. This one wouldn't be. The letter from his mother rested on the passenger seat beside him as he drove toward East Palmer Street. He had read it 4 times before sunrise, then twice more over coffee. Each time, the final sentence struck harder. "Promise me you'll never forget the people carrying mattresses." By the 7th reading, he understood something. His mother hadn't been talking about housing. Not really. She had been talking about dignity, about seeing people, about remembering what struggle looked like before success taught you to look away. The realization followed him all the way across Detroit. And when he parked outside Monica's house, he wasn't carrying a contract. He wasn't carrying a check. He wasn't carrying a proposal. He was carrying a toolbox, a real one. Heavy steel. Scratched corners. Used. For the first time in years. The sight alone felt ridiculous. Richard almost laughed. Then he climbed out of the truck. Because if he was serious about changing, he couldn't start from the top. He had to start with his hands. Monica was scraping loose paint from the porch railing when she noticed him. She immediately saw the toolbox, then the jeans, then the work gloves, then the absence of a suit. The image was so unexpected, she nearly smiled. Nearly. Instead, she narrowed her eyes. What is this? Richard set the toolbox down. A beginning. She stared. That sounds suspiciously like something rich people say before making things complicated. A corner of Richard's mouth twitched. Maybe. Monica crossed her arms. What do you want? The old version of Richard would have arrived with lawyers, architects, project managers, announcements. The old Richard would have solved everything from a distance. This Richard simply pointed toward the porch. I want to help. Monica immediately shook her head. No. The answer came fast, firm, predictable. Richard nodded. I figured. Then why ask? Because I needed to hear you say it. That caught her off guard. The two stood there quietly. Morning sunlight spilled across the street. A dog barked somewhere nearby. A city bus groaned around the corner. Life continued. Neither moved. Finally, Richard spoke. I don't want to give you charity. Monica raised an eyebrow. No? No. The answer surprised even him, because it was true. He looked around the property, the peeling trim, the cracked walkway, the sagging porch steps, then back at Monica. You don't need charity. Monica studied him carefully, trying to decide whether this was sincerity or performance. Richard continued, You need the same thing my mother needed. That got her attention. What? A chance. The word lingered. Simple, powerful, true. For several moments neither spoke. Then Monica glanced at the toolbox. What exactly are you planning to do with that? Richard smiled. I was hoping you'd tell me. 3 hours later, Richard Whitmore was covered in dust. The billionaire developer had spent most of his adult life directing construction projects. Now he was discovering how different it felt when you actually held the hammer. The porch railing fought him. Every screw seemed determined to remain exactly where it was. His back hurt. His shoulders hurt. His hands hurt. And strangely, he enjoyed it. Monica noticed. You've never done this before. I have. She laughed. Not recently. No. Obviously. Richard chuckled. Fair. For the first time since they met, the tension between them softened. Not disappeared. Softened. There was a difference. Trust wasn't built in speeches. It was built in hours. Sweat, consistency, showing up. And Richard kept showing up. Throughout the afternoon they worked side by side, replacing damaged boards, clearing debris, pulling weeds taller than Jaden. No photographers arrived. No reporters. No social media posts. Nobody knew. That mattered. Because for once, Richard wasn't performing generosity. He was practicing responsibility. Jaden loved every second of it. The boy moved through the yard carrying tiny piles of nails and screws, sorting them into coffee cans, organizing tools, sweeping sawdust, taking his responsibilities very seriously. At one point, Richard watched him carefully stacking old boards. You know, those don't have to be perfect. Jaden looked up. They do if we're keeping them. The answer hit Richard unexpectedly, because it sounded exactly like something his mother would have said. Not wasteful, not careless. Respectful. The same philosophy, the same values. Different family, different generation, same heart. Richard found himself smiling, then wondering how many other children like Jaden existed in buildings his company had renovated. How many dreams, how many families, how many stories. The question hurt, but not as much as it should have. because pain meant he was finally paying attention. Near sunset, another truck arrived. Monica immediately stiffened. A white contractor van, company logo, clipboards, everything she disliked. 3 people stepped out: an engineer, a housing attorney, a project coordinator. Richard saw her expression. They aren't here for the house. What are they here for? Richard took a slow breath, then handed her a folder. Monica opened it cautiously. The first page made her blink. The second made her stare. The third made her sit down. Richard watched silently, allowing her time. Finally, she looked up. What is this? A proposal? The words immediately made her suspicious again. I knew it. Richard smiled. Read the rest. She did. Slowly, carefully, page after page. By the time she reached the end, she looked genuinely stunned. Because this wasn't a donation. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't charity. It was something entirely different. The proposal outlined a new nonprofit housing initiative, funded by Whitmore Urban Development, managed independently, dedicated to helping displaced working families remain homeowners, emergency repairs, tax auction assistance, community property preservation, neighborhood stabilization. Programs. Richard should have built years ago, programs he now intended to create. But one section mattered more than all the others. Monica's name. Right there on the page. Community Director. She looked up immediately. No. Richard expected that answer. What do you mean, no? I don't work for you, I know. Then why is my name here? Because I don't want someone who studied the problem. Monica stared. Richard continued. I want someone who survived it. Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that changes people. The kind that reveals truths. Monica looked back at the paperwork, then toward Jaden, then toward the house, then back at Richard. You think I can do this? The question emerged quietly, almost unwillingly. A question buried beneath years of rejection, years of being underestimated, years of being told what she wasn't. Richard answered immediately. Yes. No hesitation. No conditions. No qualifications. Just yes. Something shifted behind Monica's eyes. Not confidence. Not yet. Possibility. And possibility was where every transformation began. The sun disappeared behind the rooftops. Golden light spread across the neighborhood. The old house glowed softly. For the first time in years, it looked alive. Not restored. Not finished. Alive. Richard sat on the porch steps beside Jaden, both covered in dirt, both exhausted. The boy pointed toward the front door. What color are we painting it? Richard smiled. The question landed directly in his chest. Because he knew the answer, even before speaking. Blue. Jaden nodded thoughtfully. Good color. It is. Neither said anything else. But Richard felt his mother's presence everywhere. In the porch, in the wood, in the evening air, in the laughter drifting from the kitchen, where Monica reviewed paperwork she never imagined receiving. The house wasn't fixed. Neither was he. But both were finally healing. As darkness settled across East Palmer Street, Monica stepped onto the porch holding 3 paper cups of hot chocolate. One for Jaden, one for Richard, one for herself. Richard accepted his, surprised. It felt small, ordinary, yet somehow meaningful, Because it wasn't gratitude. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something better. A beginning. The three sat quietly beneath the fading sky, watching streetlights flicker on one by one, watching the neighborhood settle into evening, watching a future slowly take shape. None of them noticed the elderly woman standing across the street near her front gate, watching, smiling, remembering, because Grace Thompson knew something they didn't. A final piece of the story. One last truth about Ellen Whitmore. One last gift waiting to be revealed. And when she finally shared it, everything Richard believed about coming home would change forever. 3 weeks later, the house barely resembled the place Monica Harris had first walked into, carrying a mattress. The broken porch railing had been replaced. The cracked windows had been repaired. Fresh paint covered walls that had spent years surrendering to dust and time. The roof no longer leaked. The floors no longer groaned with every step. And the front door. The front door was blue. Not just any blue. A deep, warm blue that seemed to glow beneath the October sunlight. Richard stood across the street staring at it. For a moment, he couldn't move, because it was exactly the same shade. The exact shade his mother had chosen 18 years ago. The exact shade from the photographs. The exact shade from his memories. Monica stepped onto the porch holding a paintbrush. She noticed his expression immediately. What? Richard slowly pointed. The color. She looked at the door. Oh. A small smile crossed her face. I liked it. Richard laughed softly. Of course she did. Neither of them knew it yet. But somehow she had chosen the same color. Out of thousands. The coincidence felt impossible. The house seemed to approve. By noon, the neighborhood had begun to gather. Not because there was an event. Because people noticed things, especially in places where neighbors still paid attention. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. An older couple walked by carrying groceries. A mailman paused to admire the restored porch. People waved, smiled, stopped to talk. The house wasn't just changing. The block was changing with it. Monica noticed it too. The neighborhood felt different now. Warmer. Connected. Alive. Something she hadn't experienced in years. For so long, survival had required isolation. Now she found herself learning something new. How to belong somewhere. Late that afternoon, a familiar figure slowly crossed the street. Grace Thompson, 81 years old, silver hair, steady eyes, a lifetime of memories. She carried a covered baking dish. Monica immediately invited her inside. The old woman stepped through the doorway and stopped. For several seconds, she simply looked around. The restored walls, the repaired floors, the sunlight, the laughter, the life. Then she smiled. She's back. Monica tilted her head. Who? Grace looked around the room. Ellen. Silence. Richard stood near the staircase, listening. The old woman slowly walked through the living room, running her fingers along the wall, looking at the blue door, the kitchen, the windows, the porch beyond them. Memory followed her like a shadow. You know what your mother used to do every night? Richard smiled. Work. Grace laughed. Besides that. He shook his head. The old woman pointed toward the porch. Every evening around 7. Richard's expression softened. I remember. No. Grace shook her head. You remember seeing her. The distinction mattered. The room grew quiet. Grace sat carefully in one of the chairs, then continued. Your mother would sit out there every single evening. Richard nodded. I know. Do you know why? He opened his mouth, then stopped. Because suddenly he realized something. He didn't. Not really, he knew she did it. He never knew why. Grace smiled gently. She wasn't sitting there to relax. The room seemed to still. Even Jaden stopped moving. Grace looked directly at Richard. She sat there because she wanted the first thing you saw when you came home to be her. The words landed softly, yet somehow hit harder than anything else. The old woman continued, "No matter how late school ended, no matter how bad your day was, no matter how angry you got, no matter what happened, she wanted you to turn the corner and see someone waiting." Richard stared, unable to speak. Grace's eyes glistened. "She told me once that children need proof." "Proof of what?" Monica asked quietly. "Proof that somebody stays." Nobody spoke. Because everybody understood. Especially Monica. Especially Richard. Especially a 7-year-old boy who had spent years moving from one temporary place to another. Grace looked toward the front door, then back at Richard. "That chair wasn't for her. It was for you." The room disappeared, at least for Richard. Suddenly he was 10 years old again, walking home, seeing his mother on the porch, every evening, every single evening. Always there, always waiting, always staying. And for the first time in his life, he understood what she had really been giving him. Not supervision, not routine, not habit. Security. The greatest gift a parent can offer. The certainty that someone would be there when you came back. His eyes filled. He didn't try to stop it. A quiet voice broke the silence. "Mr. Richard?" Everyone turned. Jaden stood near the hallway, holding the old picture frame of his father. Richard looked up. "Yeah?" The boy hesitated, then smiled. "My mom's waiting for you." Confusion crossed Richard's face. "What?" Jaden pointed toward the kitchen. The room seemed to slow. Monica stood near the stove. A pot of soup simmered gently. Steam drifted upward. Warm light filled the room. Home. Simple. Ordinary. Beautiful. Richard looked from Jaden to Monica, then back again. Something inside him shifted, because suddenly he understood. The people waiting behind doors changed throughout life. When he was a child, it was his mother. After she died, nobody waited. Not really. Not emotionally. Not spiritually. Success waited. Meetings waited. Money waited. But people? No. For 18 years, nobody had been waiting. Until now. Not because Monica belonged to him. Not because Jaden needed him. Because they had opened a door and invited him back into humanity, back into community, back into connection, back into the version of himself his mother had hoped he would become. The realization hit him so hard, he laughed through tears, then covered his face, then laughed again. The sound filled the house. Real, broken, healing. Grace smiled. Monica smiled. Even Jaden smiled. Because some moments didn't require explanation, only presence. That evening they ate dinner together. Nothing fancy. Soup, bread, conversation. The kind of meal money couldn't improve. Outside, porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood. Inside, the house glowed. The blue front door reflected warm golden light. The restored rooms felt alive. Not because they were repaired, because they were occupied. Loved, used, lived in. Exactly as Ellen Whitmore had always intended. Months later, the Whitmore Community Housing Initiative officially opened. Monica became its first director, not because she held the most degrees, not because she knew the most policy, because she understood what housing meant when everything else disappeared. Families received help staying in their homes. Tax auction properties were restored. Neighborhoods were strengthened. People were seen. Not saved. Seen. The distinction mattered. Richard changed too. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But permanently. He spent less time hiding behind glass. More time listening. More time showing up. More time remembering. And every few weeks, he returned to East Palmer Street. Not as a benefactor. Not as a billionaire. As a neighbor. Sometimes he helped repair fences. Sometimes he shared meals. Sometimes he simply sat in the chair on the porch. The same place his mother once sat. Watching the street. Watching people come home. One evening near sunset, Richard sat alone in that chair. The air smelled faintly of autumn leaves. Inside the house, laughter drifted from the kitchen. Jaden was telling a story. Monica was laughing. The sound carried through the open window. Richard smiled, then looked up. The stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere upstairs, new glow-in-the-dark stars covered Jaden's ceiling. A new child. A new family. A new future. The house had survived. The people inside it had survived. And somehow, so had he. Richard reached into his coat pocket. The letter remained there. Folded carefully. Protected. Loved. He touched it gently, then looked toward the front door. The blue door. The door his mother had painted. The door Monica had unknowingly painted again. The door that had waited 18 years. And finally, after all that time, Richard understood something. Home was never a place waiting for you. Home was the people who made sure you never stopped believing you could return. Inside the house, Monica called out, "Richard, dinner's getting cold." He smiled, stood, and walked through the open door. Because this time someone was waiting, and this time he came home. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below. Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest burdens aren't asking to be rescued. They're simply hoping someone finally sees them. If you believe kindness still matters in this world, leave a simple one in the comments. And if you've ever gone through a hard season and came out stronger on the other side, leave a 0 so others know they're not alone. I read your comments, and I love seeing the stories this community shares. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might remind you of someone you've forgotten, someone you've lost, or maybe even the person you're becoming. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of someone else, and remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.